And we're live.
Hey, Emma.
Howdy. So I'm back again.
Yeah.
It's got to be the worst introduction ever, but you know. So today I'm joined by Mike, who I met through my Ex Jehovahs Witness group, who has very bravely asked to come on and tell us about his story of what he went through growing up and through his life as a Jehovah's Witness. So welcome, Mike. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
So all the way from you're in the USA, yeah?
Yep. Just south of Boston. So.
Cool. So we're going to get right into it. I normally ask my guests, how did you become a Jehovah's Witness?
So honestly, how I became one is the same way as so many of us. I was born in. What's actually a little bit more interesting is how the rest of my family came in. My father came in just through the preaching work. I remember him telling me he was 19 years old. He was living in Miami at the time of the 60s and 70s. There was a lot of drug violence and stuff like that going on back then. Mm-hmm. He saw his brother go down that road, and something about the brothers that went to see him that day in the service just talked to him, and he joined at that point. Mm-hmm. My mother was a little bit of a different story. She was adopted at a young age. I believe she was 3 or 4 when she was adopted by my grandfather. And he came into the religion. So I'm third generation. He came in shortly after he left World War II in the Air Force. And the kind of history of my family is what makes it a little more interesting. He was a very kind of powerful man, not just in the religion, and worked very closely with the higher ups at Bethel for many years. But he was also a powerful man in the secular world. He was in charge of overseeing a large section of the New York City bus authority. So he knew a lot of people. A lot of people knew him. And he actually had a lot of power in that world, which was kind of interesting and kind of proved, we'll get into it later on, but yeah, so that was how that all kind of came together. And then I was just unlucky enough to be born into it, I guess.
Yeah, unlucky. That's definitely the right word.
Yeah.
So, how did you feel as a kid growing up as a Jehovah's Witness? Did you enjoy any part of it?
You know, when you're born into it, I think it's only natural. I mean, it's all you know. So it's, of course, when you're younger, if it's all that you know, there are certain things you look forward to. I would look forward to going to the Kingdom Hall and seeing certain brothers and sisters. One memory that always sticks out for me is there was a much older blind couple that would always let me lead them to their seats. And, you know, this was something that when I'm a little boy, 5, 6, you absolutely look forward to every time, you know. Those were the times I did enjoy, I guess you could say, but also I didn't know anything different.
Yeah.
But that didn't last very long, to be honest. It was a very short-lived time of being happy with where I was. And the home life was really never happy. Believe it or not, for a little while, the Kingdom Hall was kind of an escape for those first 8, 9 years of my life from the home life, which is crazy as that sounds, is the absolute truth. So
yeah. So what was it like for you at school, being a witness?
School was terrible, all the way around. I mean, even from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. I mean, well, I didn't finish 12th grade. 11th grade is when I left. But, I mean, you know, birthday parties, Christmas celebrations, Thanksgiving, all those things. I would have to be removed from the classroom so all those kids could do that. And I would be in the principal's office doing schoolwork. So I was always singled out. And as everybody who's ever gone to school knows, being singled out is a very bad thing. And it follows you. And it did for a very long time. I was made fun of pretty bad. Even teachers, believe it or not, would make fun of the religion. I had a couple of very miserable teachers that were very angry with me. And I'm talking 2nd, 3rd grade here. But just because I had to be excused, you know, It was a thing. So school was miserable. It really, absolutely, it was terrible. Which actually made the Kingdom Hall more of a refuge, during that time, because it was like, oh, here are the people that understand me,
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the way they intended to work, quite frankly. So.
Yeah. I guess for teachers as well, it's extra effort for them because, you've got to be somewhere else and still watch and still given something to do. So I guess it's the whole,
Yeah, no, I agree.
extra.
I agree. I think when I look back on it now, I can understand why they were frustrated, although taking it out on a 6-7-year-old is a little bit rough, but it is what it is,
I remember being embarrassed because we got sent to school they did like a particular brochure for Jehovah's Witnesses at school, so we had to take that in, and like that was aimed at the teachers, that it told them why we didn't do Christmas and birthdays. But God, I'm talking back late 80s, 90s, early 90s.
Yeah, I mean, we're roughly the same age, so that's when I was in school too. I don't remember that brochure, but I'm sure if there was one, my parents would have given it to the school. There's no doubt.
I can't remember what it was called. I think it might have been discontinued, but yeah, it was embarrassing. Like every time you had a new teacher, you had to take this booklet in too.
Yeah,
I used to leave it in my school bag for weeks and just say, "Oh, I kept forgetting."
Yeah, no, I mean it's a rough thing to be singled out from all these people, and that's what you have to deal with Monday through Friday for 6-7 hours a day, and so getting made fun of a lot and everything else for being different, it wasn't a good experience at all. There's no doubt about it.
If at the weekend you've knocked on someone's door with a Watchtower and Awake and someone from school answers the door, and then you have to go back to school on Monday and face that child.
Exactly. And that became much worse once I got into high school, which I know we're jumping ahead a little bit here, but I mean, once I was in high school and was mentally just done with the Jehovah's Witnesses, every door I knocked on, it was just a fake facade, you know what I mean, of what I was doing. So then when I would run into kids from high school, then it was particularly terrible. It really was.
Embarrassing, isn't it?
Very, very.
So were your parents strict with kind of music that they would ban, films they would ban, and certain TV programs you wasn't allowed to watch?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think back to the late 80s at the beginning of The Simpsons. We were not allowed to watch. I wasn't. I was an only child. Was not allowed to watch The Simpsons. Married with Children, stuff like that. But what's funny is, you think, okay, a young kid maybe shouldn't be watching that. But even the movie All Dogs Go to Heaven, I don't know if you remember that movie.
Yeah.
It's a Disney cartoon, and they had a freak out about that because, well, dogs don't go to heaven. So I wasn't even allowed to watch that. Everything was just very tightly controlled. I mean, even a Disney movie if it somehow went against the agenda, it wasn't allowed.
But yeah, a lot of Disneys were rolled out because a lot have magic and lots of wizards and ghosts and different things in them.
Fantasia was a big no-no, all that stuff. So yeah.
Like you're not watching that. So meetings was a bit of a getaway for you, but did you enjoy the things you had to do there, like giving talks, being made pressured to answer up, that kind of thing?
At first, it wasn't. I remember my very first talk. I think everybody does, because you get the big round of applause and everybody's all excited and everything. And so I remember that very specifically as being, a good event, and everybody coming up to me afterwards and, oh, congratulations. But as time wore on, I definitely started to hate it more and more and more. It really didn't even take a lot of time, to be honest with you, where it was just because you have to spend the time preparing to give those talks. And if you do it last minute, let's just say, and the talk doesn't go so smoothly, as you get judged in front of the whole congregation about how badly your talk went and why, and that's humiliating on its own. So, I really did start to hate it after not too long, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I did. It used to make me physically ill, like I've mentioned before on my chats, that I used to get migraines and feel sick, and then I didn't know what anxiety was back then, and I was due to give a talk, and I think it was with someone who lived up the road, but my mum had practiced it with me, and then about 2 minutes before I was supposed to get up on the stage and do this talk, I just handed my mum my Bible with all my notes in and went, "You're going to have to do it." She was like, what? I was like, I can't do it. And I had to go out the back, and I was like having what I didn't know was like a panic attack and anxiety because I just all of a sudden felt dread. I couldn't get up there and do it.
Right.
And I think I left about 2 years after that, but in that whole time, I never did talks, and they stopped putting me, because they put you on the notice board out the back, and you have to go and check. So everybody knows who's due to do these talks as well.
Exactly.
In the end, they just stopped adding me to them, which was a relief for me, because I just kept cancelling all the time. So I was just like, I can't do this anymore.
Well, I think, to be honest with you, in my particular case, I think there was an added pressure because my parents, believe it or not, met at Bethel. Okay, at which, as anybody who's not familiar with Jehovah's Witnesses, Bethel is like the Mecca, right, for Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, if you get to go there and visit, it's a really big deal. If you get to eat there, it's a even bigger deal. And I think the big hope for me was that I was going to wind up going to Bethel. I know that was my grandfather's hope. I know that was my father's hope for sure. So whenever there were impromptu talks, I was expected to jump in and do those impromptus. And it was a lot of pressure, It really
I can imagine. We visited Bethel because that's where they print all the Watchtower and Awake. So we went there on a congregation coach trip, and honestly, it was boring as hell. Really I think in the same day, I think we went there in the National Museum, but because they had like mummies and stuff like that, we were told to ignore parts of it. Like told, they'll say there's fossils and stuff, but that's not real. And there was like, just ignore this part and that part.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Why take us there then? But
exactly.
I looked at Bethel and I was thinking, I don't want to come here. It's boring.
And I honestly, I thought the same thing. There was a facility, everybody knows about the Brooklyn, New York one, but there was another facility, I think it was in Patterson. I can't remember exactly now, but where they had a farm and animals, and I actually enjoyed going there because I remember going petting the cows and stuff, and that was a big deal for me. But getting back to my grandfather a little bit, he knew so many people that I remember actually going into some of the apartments there where they actually lived. And I mean, that's really the backstage stuff that most people on tours don't get to see. So yeah, it was a little intense. There's no doubt about it.
I can imagine, yeah. I felt pressure just being an eldest daughter because my stepdad was an eldest. So I couldn't imagine like the pressure you would feel with your parents being Bethelites. Yeah,
it was tough. It was very tough. And my grandfather, having been in Bethel and worked, I mean, he was there before the governing body was the governing body. You know what I mean? So he knew a lot, and there was a lot of pressure there. There's no doubt.
Yeah, I can imagine. So do you want to tell us a bit more about, I know you've touched on parts about what it was like growing up with your parents.
Yeah, I'll get into that a little bit, for sure. I think for a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses that are in, there is a double standard, right? There's what the congregation sees and what they present to the outside world, and then there's what's going on behind closed doors. And I think for a lot of us, those are two very different worlds. My world, my father was what you would call a functioning alcoholic. I mean, he had a job and all that. He maintained his job, but every single night there would be a minimal of 4 or 5 whiskey sours in his hand when he came home. And, that's when he would start getting very abusive. I remember, it's a crappy memory, but I remember being as young as 3. It's amazing to remember that far back, but my father just screaming and hitting my mother violently, and I mean terribly violently, to the point where the police were called. And I remember being upstairs in the home just crying and cuddled up in a ball because it was just so loud and violent. Just I would hold on to my stuffed animals. I know that sounds funny, but I would. That was like what I would do when I was that young. I would just kind of hang on to him for dear life. And then the violence kind of turned more towards me. As I got a little bit older, he was very aggressive with me. I think he took some kind of, it's weird to say, but I almost feel like he took some kind of enjoyment in hitting me. I don't, I think there was some kind of enjoyment there for him, because he would try and find like the biggest objects he could to hit me with. And I mean, I was a young child. I'm not talking a teenager here. I'm talking 6, 7 years old. And he is, I mean, I would have welts. And it was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. If he wasn't at work or at the congregation, he was drunk. And it went on like that for many years. And nobody knew except the police, which is the most amazing thing. The police were called to my house so many times. I remember hiding in my room, and, you could hear the police radios and stuff as they would come in. My father had thrown phones out the door. He would break stuff in the house. The police would come in, talk to him, and then leave. I don't know if it was the time. I don't know if it was because it was the 80s and the early 90s and these things weren't taken quite as seriously. But they would. I mean, there would be stuff all over the front lawn from him throwing it out there, and they would just leave, and there I was left in my room, either after being hit severely or my mother being hit like that, and they were gone, and it was just back to him again. But that's how loud it was that neighbors would call the police. And somehow this never got either to the brothers' attention, or they just didn't care. As you know, it's a very male-dominated organization. The men have all the power, and if you're a child or a woman and you've done, and you're being abused that way, it's like you're gaslit into thinking it's your fault, So that's one thing I would say, is that Jehovah's Witnesses, I think, really perfected gaslighting unbelievably. If you're a victim of anything, somehow it's on you for being that victim. Yeah. What did I do to make my father so upset that he had to hit me? What did my mother do that made him so upset that he had to hit her? It wasn't what's wrong with his behavior. It was what's wrong with our behavior. I was just a child. It's like there was nothing wrong with my behavior, because I was a little fidgety at a meeting. Like, show me a kid that isn't fidgety. I'd love to see that, So I don't know. That was kind of the early childhood years. That was just kind of how it went for me for many years. And that's why the Kingdom Hall was kind of that refuge for a little while, because he wouldn't do it at the Kingdom Hall. He wouldn't do it there. So for those couple of hours, it was a little bit of peace 3 times a week, but that, of course, didn't last long either. So what wound up happening was my mother wanted nothing to do with this anymore. And I didn't realize this at the time at all, but she had found some people who wanted to help her get away, let's say. Some worldly people, not in the religion, obviously. And they had a plan to where they were somehow withdrawing. It's all a little bit hazy, but they were somehow withdrawing money from my father's account, and my mother was stockpiling it, and it was in little enough increments that he wouldn't notice, but over a large period of time.
Right. And
there were 3 of these people, and what would happen is, and this is so twisted, I guess, because you hear about abuse coming from within the organization, especially I've heard from females so much of how they were abused by elders or ministerial servants or trusted members. For me, it didn't happen that way. It actually came from outside of that. So my mother would leave with a couple of these people on a semi-nightly basis when my father was at work. He worked the night shift at that time. And because I was so young, one of them would stay behind to watch me. And I don't know if you remember Cookie Crisp, the cereal, and this is such an odd memory to stick out, but they would bring me like boxes of Cookie Crisp to like bribe me essentially to not tell my father that they were there. And one of them that would stay behind, which I can't remember names to save my life, but I swear I'll never forget this person's face as long as I live. They took that opportunity to do some pretty inappropriate stuff with me. You know, it was mostly just a lot of touching and groping and things of that nature. But yeah, it was pretty horrible. And I'll just never forget, like, the face, like I said, I can even remember the smell to an extent of the person, because they weren't very clean. And yeah, it was something that definitely affects me even to this day, to be honest with you. I don't know how else to put it. It does. I mean, it's been obviously, I'm 39 now. It's been a very long time, but to say that I don't think about it ever would be a lie, you know, because I do. What wound up happening with all that was eventually, I know this isn't something we even talked about in like the lead up to this live chat, but my mother decided that she wanted to attempt to murder my father. This is a very, very serious thing. I mean, homicide, police were invested. There's a whole thing. So what happened was she had enough money stockpiled, and one day my dad went to go out to work and the car wouldn't start. And it just kept cranking and cranking. It was like a brand new car, so it didn't make sense. So we popped the hood, and there were wires from the battery leading back towards the gas tank. And apparently they had tried to explode the car when it would start.
Wow.
In my driveway. Like,
wow.
So this didn't work because these people weren't very smart. And that's when the police really got involved, because he was like, what's going on? So they come immediately. I mean, I'm talking homicide detectives and everything are at my house looking through the car. They take me down to the police station, and they're showing me pictures of these three people, because apparently they had been going to ATMs to make these withdrawals. So they had the ATM pictures. And here I am. What was I at this point? This has gone on for a little better than a year. So I'm like maybe 9 or 10. And at this point, here I am picking out these people out of a police lineup, and telling, yeah, these are the ones that have been at my house. But I never mentioned the sexual abuse. I think I was ashamed of it for some really weird reason. I think there's a part of me that still is. I don't know why. It's obviously not my fault, but it's like you just can't help but feel a little weird about it, I guess. I don't know. But that was kind of the early childhood years, and they were awful. They were awful.
A lot of victims do say the same thing. Like, I've spoken to a lot of victims, and you know, thank you for opening up and telling us about that, because I know it's a hard thing to talk about.
It's a very hard thing, and to be honest with you, that's not something I talk about with anyone. The whole reason I'm doing it now is because, I mean, I think we talked about in the pre-chat, Zach, that you had interviewed a few weeks ago, was just so incredibly brave. And I was like, maybe I should do it too, you know, because maybe just one person will get something out of it, you know, and that's the whole reason behind it.
I mean, you did from Zach, so it's a chain reaction. Like, somebody else will probably come to me now and say, I saw Mike tell his story. It's made me want to tell mine. So it's kind of like a chain reaction.
And I hope that's the case, because the other thing that I'm selfishly hoping to get out of this is that by speaking my truth, maybe it helps get it off my soul a little bit. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, definitely. You know? I hope it does really help you in that way. We've got a comment here from Victoria. I'm just going to flash up.
Okay.
So many witnesses have issues with alcohol, which is somewhat understandable when you consider it's the only allowed vice. And there is an undercurrent of depression with vast numbers of them, yeah. True.
I mean, I think that's true. I mean, my mother and my father were both, I think, very depressed individuals. When I look back on them now, as an adult, and I look back to that time, I think they both were very depressed. My father had to step down from being an elder. My grandfather was also no longer an elder. They had lost their position in the congregation a bit because of my mother, obviously. And yeah, thank you, by the way. But I think that led to maybe his alcoholism being a little bit worse and stuff. I just don't know. But yeah, so those were the early years. That was, I just didn't have a place where I felt safe at all, except for those first few years at the Kingdom Hall. And that's why those, up until about the time I was baptized, I was fine going there because it was peaceful, in a strange sort of way.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what happened with your mom? Did she manage to get away?
Well, so at the end, she wound up not being charged for that. I do believe that they caught those people and charged them, I believe, with attempted murder. Somehow my mother wound up getting out of that scot-free. And to be honest with you, this goes back to my grandfather. I think he might have had a lot to do with that, because he really knew people, like very powerful people. And I think he was able to get her out of that situation somehow.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he pulled some strings somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. I remember, just as a side point, being at his house, and I love my grandfather, I did, and he had these volumes of handwritten notes about this thick of conversations he had with mayors, governors, everything, because he was such a big part of the transit authority in New York, that these were people he communicated with on a somewhat regular basis. And so I remember looking through them in these thick conversations with dates and everything noted. And so, yeah, he knew a lot of people. He knew a lot of people, which I think is kind of rare in the organization. To have somebody that knows so much in the secular world is kind of a rare thing.
Yeah.
So,
it must have been somebody probably that the governing body used as well, because, they're always saying to us back in the day, don't go to college, don't go to university, don't get a career. But then when all these sex abuse cases start being thrown against them, they're asking for lawyers and stuff like that. And
Exactly. That's so true. But it's funny. You talk about that too. I remember being in high school, and my high school had a really awesome program where you would do your basic classes in the beginning part of the day, and then in the afternoon, you could take a class you could learn how to fly a plane, fix a plane. They had all kinds of culinary stuff, medical stuff, so that by the time you graduated high school, you had a leg up. And I always wanted to fly. I was obsessed with planes as a young boy, and it was just kind of a dream of mine to fly them. And I remember my father looking at me and saying, "You're not flying. I'm not paying for you to do that." He goes, "You'll never fly a plane." He's like, "Jehovah's Witnesses shouldn't be flying," because the whole theory is that you'd be tempted into adultery with the stewardesses, right? And so that was the whole, that was what he told me word for word. And that, how was I going to make meetings if I'm flying to Paris or something like this? And so unfortunately for me, that route didn't wind up panning out. But, that's just kind of an example of the control, like you talk about with education, like, oh no, you can't do that. You know what I mean? There's just too much temptation in that field, But then, like you said, the governing bodies calling for lawyers. So it is a contradiction.
Yeah, there was something released not long ago, and I can't directly quote what it was, but it was directed towards the elders, and it said that if their son or daughter went to university, they had to step down as an elder or a ministerial servant.
I remember that, actually. Yep.
It's just like, what?
I remember there was an elder's daughter that had gone to college in my congregation, and it was like the talk of the whole congregation, how she was in college and how she wasn't doing pioneer work. And, she was really looked down upon for that. But I mean, I hope now she's living her best life, and she got out of it, obviously, and was very smart,
Yeah.
So good for her.
Yeah.
But
I mean, my stepdad stepped down, but that's because I spent 2 years doing loads of stuff I wasn't supposed to, and always grasped onto the elders, and Emma's doing this and Emma's doing that. So he was kind of like, well, if you're not doing it, I can't go and tell other people to do it. So I kind of, I saw his point. He didn't want to be hypocritical, so he was like, I can't be an elder anymore. He got reappointed, obviously, after I left. But yeah.
Did he really? I didn't know that. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that covers a lot of the major stuff in the early childhood years. Where it started to flip, I was studying to get baptized, and by this point, I was baptized at 13. But
Me
before,
too.
what, really? No kidding. And you have to agree, that is just, I mean, they're asking you to make a major life decision at the age of 13 is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous because of the consequences involved with being baptized. But anyway, I remember studying the book and answering the questions and all that. And even as I was sitting there doing that, I was thinking to myself, I just don't want this anymore. I do not want it. But what choice do you have, right? Everybody's expecting it, certainly from me. I mean, it was a very high pressure thing, and it's your family, your whole family's in there. I mean, cousins, aunts, uncles, the whole thing. And it's like, okay, well, I got to go through with this. But honestly, I remember at the Circuit Assembly in Queens that I was baptized at, I remember as my head was going under the water, I was thinking to myself, crap, to be honest with you, this is not good. This is not what I want. And believe it or not, I actually was part of a talk given directly after the baptism. I went up on stage to be interviewed by an elder in our congregation, along with 2 other kids my age. And we did a little talk thing. It was directly after lunchtime. So I was up on the stage in front of all those people for that. And again, everybody's congratulating you. There's the applause after you come up from the water and all that, but I knew even before then that, okay, this isn't going to continue anymore. I can't do it. And that kind of leads into the teenage years where I think a lot of us maybe started kind of living double lives where, because of all that happened with my mom and stuff, a lot of people in the congregation now had looked down on our family. I remember in particularly being snubbed by the circuit overseer. He was supposed to come for dinner, and then all of a sudden plans changed. And I think a lot of that had to do with my mother and what had happened. So now all the kids in the congregation didn't really want to have anything to do with me. There was, I think it's probably true in every congregation, I don't know, but there were cliques. And I was in none of those cliques. Yeah. So now I have nobody in the congregation, and I'm not allowed to have anybody outside of the congregation. So what wound up happening was I wound up making friends outside of it, of course, and doing worldly stuff. I mean, I just had the very unfortunate luck of going to high school with, I believe, 5 other Jehovah's Witnesses from the same congregation. So it didn't take long before I was in the back room for a public reproof for smoking, actually. They had all told on me because they saw me smoking across the street, and they all went to the elders and, ratted me out, which is whatever. And I got publicly reproved maybe 2 years after I was after I was baptized. So I was about 15. Then that got rescinded after an amount of time. And then I got caught again, but this time it was for weed. They had seen me giving somebody a little baggie of weed in school. And so they went to the elders again. And that's when I was disfellowshipped. That was a tough time right there. Because as anybody who's a Jehovah's Witness knows, once you disfellowshipped, that's it. It's over. It's over. You then walk into a kingdom hall and people literally turn their backs on you. Literally turn around like you do not exist. And you have to sit in the back and pretend like you don't exist somehow. Like, you know, you're just a shadow against the back wall. And that was tough. I do remember when they, you know, we had the judicial meeting and everything, and finally I had just admitted it. You know, they had said, well, have you been doing this? I'm like, no. And then I finally just said, yeah, you know what, I have been. And my father was there and everything, and they had me leave the room and then come back, and they're like, well, we've decided we're going to disfellowship you. And I remember crying. I did, because not because I was sad about being kicked out of the religion. I honestly could care less about that. It was more about the family. Like that I wasn't going to be able to talk to anymore. I was terrified that my mother's father, my grandfather there, would never want to talk to me again, you know, and aunts and uncles and cousins and all these people that were in my life. I'm going to lose it all. That's it. It's all gone now. And I have nobody, except for a very terrible father and a pretty messed up mom. So that was tough. That was definitely tough. So what I had been doing was for quite a few years, maybe 3 or 4, was I would sneak out at night and go meet my worldly friends, right? I would wait till my father passed out, and I would just go out the window and ride my bike to God knows where at 2 a.m. and hang out with friends. And this continued all the way through, and nobody had known about this. And this went on for years. And then I got disfellowshipped, and I continued doing it. And nobody knew about it until one night, finally, I was 16 years old, and my father woke up early and noticed I wasn't in bed. And I came in, and I saw all the lights on at the house as I was coming back home. And I said, oh, that's it. I'm done. So I didn't even try crawling back through the window or any of that. I just walked in through the front door, you know. And he said, well, where have you been? And I told him. I said, look, I've been out with some friends. I said, I'm not going to lie to you. I said, you know, this is what I was doing. I said, I can't have friends in the organization. I said, I have to have people in my life. And I've met some great friends over the years, and that's who I was with. And he was very calm. I remember that was the thing. Like, I had this weird moment of feeling like, holy crap, maybe this is going to be okay, because he was very calm. He was sitting there in a chair, and he said, well, what is it that you're doing? What is it that you want? And I said, look, you're my father, and I love you and everything. I said, but this religion, I said, I can't do it anymore. I said, I don't want to be a part of it. I said, I just want to live my life. I said, it's just not for me. And I remember he was very calm, and he's just kind of nodding his head for a minute. He said, okay. He said, well, how about we talk about this in the morning? I said, yeah, great. And I'm thinking, here I am. I've actually let this off my chest now, right? I've gotten this off, and I think he's being extraordinarily calm. I actually fell asleep thinking, shit, I'm going to be all right. You know, this is going to be okay. And then I woke up. He had ripped all the phones off the wall. Back when there were phones on walls. He ripped them all off the wall. He had started tearing apart the living room and the kitchen a little bit. And I woke up to that, and he was just losing his mind. He was just screaming full force. I should mention at this point, there was no more physical abuse on me. I got to a certain age. This is a quick side story here. I got into a certain age, and one night he was, again, beating my mother, pulling her by the hair, and I was about 12 years old, actually. And this is when the physical abuse stopped, at least for me. He was doing this, and I was laying in my bed hearing it, and I got so angry, and I was terrified of my dad. He was a big guy. He was really kind of jacked up, and, you know, I was just a little guy, a little chubby guy, you know, so I remember going into the bedroom, and as he's got her by the hair, and I said, if you don't let her go, I'm going to fucking hit you. Just like that is how I said it. And he stopped, and he looked at me and said, all right, calm down. And I said, no, get off of her, you know. And he did. And he never went to hit me again. Wow. So I don't know how I did it to this day. I look back on that, like, how did I pull that off? You know what I mean?
That's a really brave thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, he would have demolished me with one hit. You know, there's no question. But I think it shocked his senses a little bit to hear me say that to him, and he didn't know quite how to react. I think he realized that I had changed at that point. But anyway, so getting back to that next day, he wasn't coming after me physically, but he was saying a lot of very insane things and just losing his mind. The house was a mess, all of it. So at the time, he had worked a split shift. So he would work 4 hours in the morning, come home for a couple hours, and then work 4 hours in the afternoon. And he did this whole flip out thing. And thank you, Facebook user. He did this whole flip out thing, and then he went to work. And me and my mother looked at each other, and I had called a friend to come over who was a couple of years older than me. And we said, we got to get out of here. We got to go. This is it. This is it. We have to go. So we made the decision that morning that we were going to leave. We were just going to go. It was not a very well thought out plan, I can tell you that. So he came home from his split shift and continued with his insanity for the couple hours he was home. But before he had done that, my mother had made some phone calls. It was on Columbus Day, so October 11th, 1998. And that's a holiday, and most things are closed. But somehow she had found a truck rental company that was open. So she had made all these arrangements to get this box truck. He comes home for a couple hours, goes back to work. She goes and gets the box truck. I have a bunch of my friends at the house now, and we load everything that we could carry into this box truck in a matter of an hour and a half. I'm talking an entire house loaded, just thrown in to this box truck, and that's it. We're getting out of Dodge. What was I going to say? Sorry. So I had some friends over, and at this point now we're like, screw it. We know we're out. We know we're leaving. I'm not going to see this man again. So now we're smoking butts in the house. You know, I'm drinking his liquor. You know, we're kind of, I'm not proud of this necessarily, but we're kind of destroying the house. He had these big double closets that were floor to ceiling mirrors. And a couple of my friends had wrote on it in lipstick that Satan loves you and all this other stuff. And we got in that truck and we left. I remember looking out the side mirror. My mother was driving. So it was my mother, me, and this other kid who I'll keep nameless, but he was a couple of years older. And we all left together and said, that's it, we're gone. We had no plan. We had no nothing. So our first step was to get to a mall as soon as possible before he came home and realized what had happened while the credit cards were still active. So my mother used the credit cards and got cell phones and did a couple other things, got a hotel for the night. And the next day we drove around Manhattan Island selling every single thing that we could possibly sell out of the back of that truck to various, I mean, we had a lot of antique stuff. So there was no Google, right? So we're literally looking through the phone book for antique dealers and their addresses. And we're driving all over Manhattan, getting rid of all of this stuff. We wind up with maybe $2,500 at the end of the day. We park the truck, get on Amtrak with our clothes, some luggage, and from New York up to Boston, we go with no plan, no real money. I mean, $2,500 is nothing. And that was it. We were gone. Just gone. And I still had some friends down there, obviously some friends, and now we had a cell phone, and you know, I was calling them to find out what was going on at the house, and they were telling me what was going on, the activity. There were lots of people there. It was a whole thing, obviously. And that was it. We left. See you later. Just left everything behind in the drop of a hat.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we've got a longer comment here from Stacey. Yeah. You're so very brave, Mike. I've been going to therapy for a little over a year, but have yet to actually really talk about anything. The comment on shame resonates so much with me. I have a lot of that and self-blame, even though my head knows I shouldn't. Hearing it from you makes me see I'm not alone in that. Thank you for sharing. In brackets, Emma, the term answer not maybe shoulda.
Yeah. Well, no, I understand, Stacey. I do, and I'm happy that you realize you're not alone, because you're not. I think a lot of us that have gone through any kind of abuse. I think for me it was just weird because that abuse didn't come from inside the organization like it has for so many people that that were in it. I think that's a weird thing. I guess I don't know. It's like what a double whammy kind of. But yeah, the shame thing, it's something that I've worked very hard to get over, and I still do. I mean, that's why I'm hoping doing this helps me get over that a little bit, and saying it out loud to, you're not alone. You're definitely not alone,
Yeah, I mean, you may not have been abused by an actual Jehovah's Witness, but because your mum was trying to escape that religion, that's what happened. It's connected still to the,
It is. It is.
So.
No, it is. And it was, definitely a terrible thing. There's no doubt about it. And like I said, I still have certain struggles with that to this day. I'd be lying if I said I didn't, So.
So glad you're out and evolving, growing in your journey from those horrible things.
Thank you, Seamus. Thank you. So what wound up happening after that, just to kind of evolve the story a little bit here, was we were in the Boston area for a little while. We had a little bit of a tough time. And long story short, my mother wound up finding an apartment. And I remember going right to her. I'm at this point 17 now. I wind up finding a job, and I'm basically handing over my paychecks, to help pay for the rent and everything. And it's tough. It's a struggle, but we're making it work somehow. One day I came home from work, though, and half the furniture in the apartment was gone. Half the furniture. I'm talking the kitchen table, the couch, all this stuff. And I'm like, I walk in, I'm like, where's our furniture? And that's when she tells me how, now she had been dating somebody at this point. And that's how she tells me that she's decided that she wants to go to Florida with him. And how that's her plan now, is she wants to move down there with her. And I couldn't go to Florida. And I said, I can't do that. She says, oh, I know. I said, what do you mean you know? And there was a very large kind of argument that happened more with the guy because he was there at that time. So, I mean, here I am. I'm kind of losing it a little bit. I'm like, what do you mean you're going to Florida? What's going on? I have nobody. I know nobody in Boston, not one soul. And so the next day, I leave to go to work. It was a gentleman that my mother had met. Just nothing to do with him that way. It was just a gentleman my mother had met that had helped get me the job. He picks me up to take me to work. We make a 3-point turn around to go up the street, and all of a sudden, his car is surrounded by police cars. And they take me out of the car, and essentially what happened was she called the state and said, look, I'm leaving. You have to take care of him. He's still a minor. And I was actually taken into custody with handcuffs and put into state care. I found out that night after I was gone, she had a big party at the apartment. And the next day she left and went to Florida with this guy. And on the way, she stopped at the facility that they were holding me at because they didn't know what to do with me yet, and left $20. She left me a $20 bill and said, make sure he gets this. It was my canteen money. And that was it.
Whoa.
Yep. That was it. That was the last time I ever saw my mother. I didn't actually see her. I had seen her the day before. That was the last time I had ever. Yeah.
Oh, that literally brought tears to my eyes. Fuck. Like that. That's harsh, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And then she was gone, and I was left in state care. This is where I guess if there's a positive to anything, I'm very lucky that there was at the end of this a positive, right? I wound up meeting a family, very incidentally, that was kind enough that once I turned 18, they kind of took me under their wing, took me in, and gave me an opportunity to get on my feet. If they hadn't have done that, I don't think I'd be alive. And I'm being perfectly honest. I really don't. I think I would have gotten sucked into some pretty bad stuff. And I don't think I'd be here talking to you if they hadn't have done what they did. There's no doubt about it. I was very lucky there. But for that period of time, that was, I mean, that day, when the staff comes up to me, the staff at the facility, and they're like, "Oh, well, your mother left you $20." What I actually said to them was, "I don't want that. I want another kid to have that. I didn't want it. I just didn't want it. I could have cared less." So that's how it ended with her. And that was pretty much it. Getting back to my grandfather just a tiny bit, because of the people he knew, they were actually able to track me down. I think he had called in a couple of favors from PIs, and they were actually able to track me down pretty quickly as soon as I was in state custody. And I remember they came up, my father and my grandfather came up, and they were trying to say that they wanted to take me back to New York. And so the caseworker comes in and talks to me, and they said, "Well, your father and your grandfather were here. They want to bring you back to New York." And I remember, and I'm alone at this point. I mean, there's nothing left here for me in Boston. So there's a party that would say, "Oh, well, why not just go back to New York?" But I'm all set with my father. I'm done. And he was not a good man, right? So I said to the caseworker, I said, "Look, I don't know where I am here." I said, in this Boston area, I didn't know neighborhoods. I didn't have friends. I said, "Just leave me alone." I said, "I will not give you guys a hard time." I said, "I'll just do whatever I have to do until I'm 18. But if you send me back to New York, the second I get off that train, bus, plane, whatever you're sending me on, I am a ghost and you will never see me again." Because I had a ton of friends down there. You know what I mean? At this point now, I had a good amount of people down there that would have kept me hidden, no problem. And I would have disappeared and probably wound up still being dead at this point. But, so they did. They left me alone. And I just wound up being lucky enough to somehow make a life for myself in this area, which was not an easy thing to do by any means. I've worked very hard, very, very hard to get to the point where I'm at now. Physically, mentally, all of it, to come to this stage of life. I mean, I have a family now. I have a beautiful son, 2 great soon-to-be stepchildren that are just my life. They really are. And it's funny because I look at my son now, and he just turned 3 in February, and I don't know how my father or my mother did what they did. I don't, mentally, I can't conceive it. I mean, I just, I don't see how they did it, how they acted with me the way they did, how my father was so physically abusive to me. I can't imagine laying a hand on my son. I just, the thought of it makes me kind of sick, to be honest with you. So I don't know, I just don't get it. And, I have worked very, very hard physically. I managed to get myself a decent career, to where I'm able to support my family and take care of them. And I'm just very lucky for that. I am. There's, again, without the help of that family in the beginning, I don't think any of this would have happened. I really don't. All the credit has to go to them for taking me in. Then it really does. But I got lucky there. I got real lucky, and my life now, it's good. I enjoy my life. I do. But I still have struggles with certain things from back then. I do. I have terrible anxiety. I still do get depression. I am on Prozac. It's the only thing I can take. I'm a professional driver, so because of that, you're not allowed to be on certain medications. So Prozac is one of the ones that you can take, and I'm on that now, and that helps kind of keep things a little more even for me. But the biggest joy I get is with my family. It is. There's no doubt. Just walking around our neighborhood on a sunny day, it's like after work, it's like the best thing in the world to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But anyway,
wow, you went through a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I did. There was a lot there. And, those are kind of the broad strokes of it all. But again, the whole point for me is just to let people know that, no, you're not alone. And I felt like I was in very dire circumstances at 16, 17. And yeah, I did get a little bit of help there. There's no doubt. But I mean, I made it out. I made it out. And so many of the people you interview, that have gone through such terrible things, I mean, they've made it too. And I think that's the point, is that you can, if you're a Jehovah's Witness trying to get out now and you're watching this thinking that there's no hope, there is. The world is not the scary place that people make it out to be, that the Jehovah's Witnesses make it out to be. There are good people in the world, and they will help you. And, you can get out and have a good life, and it's possible. And no matter what, you just can't give up. I think that's my biggest thing now is I think it's the thing that's been true for me for a long time is I'm determined. I am just determined. I'm too stubborn to, I'm just too damn stubborn to go down at this point, and I think if you're a Jehovah's Witness right now and you're questioning your beliefs or anything, that means you have that fire and you are ready for something different. And you just got to light it. You just got to light it and you'll be okay. You will. So.
Yep. You're definitely a survivor. And, I don't know that family, but shout out to that family that helped you through that major hard time.
Absolutely.
And,
no, absolutely.
Enabled you to be here now and share your story, and your story will help other people, that's for sure. Like, I do get a lot of people inboxing me saying your story has helped me, so
that's awesome. And that's all, and honestly, that's all it's about. It's, for me, it's nice to just kind of take a deep breath and just let it out a little bit, and be able to do that. So I thank you for that opportunity, quite frankly.
Well, thank you for trusting me to come on and talk to me and talk about things you haven't spoke about before.
No, of course, absolutely. So
yeah, life is definitely so much better out. It's an emotional roller coaster. It is. I mean, you come out and you're still going to face the normal things of the world. You're still going to get relationships that end. You're still going to get jobs that end. You're still going to struggle sometimes to find a place to live. But at the end of the day, it's completely different to what you go through when you're in. Like, I had a worldly best friend that the elders kept telling me not to hang around with, and I kept up that relationship with her. And she was there for me when I left. She was the only person, and the non-baptized publisher guy that I got with, those were the two people that were there for me when I left. So if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have had anybody, because I lost all my friends and family.
Right, exactly. And the organization itself, I mean, just kind of to touch on them for a minute about this whole thing, their whole idea is to make you terrified of the real world. It is to terrify you. I mean, it really is. It's like, these people are terrible. They're going to do awful things to you. You have to stay with us. And so what happens is, when you wind up leaving, as you don't know how to handle yourself in the real world, because you have no experience with it. And that's on purpose. It is purposely done that way. Whether it's to try and make you want to come back or whatever the reasoning is. I mean, it is a very cult mentality. And I don't think that word is, by the way, just on a side note, I don't think that word is used enough to describe. This is not a religion. Catholicism is a religion. Judaism is a religion. Buddhism, religion. This is a cult. This is a cult. They separate you from everything else. And then if you mess up, now they separate you from your family. That is a cult. And it needs to be described as that, And people in the outside world, by the way, as you know, don't see it that way because it's always the friendly faces, right? It's always happy, friendly, smiling people. And, oh, they're so respectful. They're so nice.
Yeah. They're nice people.
Yeah, they're great.
Don't say horrible things about them. They're lovely.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, just because they come and knock on your door once in a while, that's all you see or know. Like, well, I've got a friend of a friend who's a Jehovah's Witness, and they're lovely. Well,
yeah. Are they though? Like, and you know what? I'll have to make this point, I guess, that there are some people in the congregations, I think we can all attest to this, that even I look back on with fond memories of these people. But the organization itself, I mean, it is just, the whole mentality is just, it's just a cult. You know what I mean? The only difference is that, it hasn't turned into Jamestown yet. You know what I mean? They don't have us drinking Kool-Aid or have people drinking Kool-Aid just yet. But I mean, would you be surprised if they said, well, now we have to do this? Like, these people would do it. They'd fall right off the cliff. You know what I mean? So it's a cult all the way.
I mean, they've got people dying from not having blood. So it's not a mass thing at one occasion, but people are sacrificing themselves by not having blood transfusions.
That's a great point. Yeah. That's a great point. Actually, on a side note, on my 31st birthday of all things, on the day of my birthday, I had a terrible leg injury. That required immediate surgery, emergency surgery. I was in the hospital for a month. But I remember when I woke up in the CCU, I looked at my wrist and I remember seeing the blood transfusion band around my arm. And I swear to you, one of the first thoughts I had was, thank God I am not a Jehovah's Witness anymore, because that blood saved my life. I would have bled out if I didn't have it. So, yeah.
When I left, when I went to my doctor's, one of the first things I said to him was, can you take that no blood sticker off my file?
Yeah.
Because I wanted to make sure that he knew that, I will have blood now. But I think, thinking back, I don't know. I think the last few years I was in, I probably would have got disfellowshipped for having a blood transfusion if I needed it, because I couldn't see myself letting myself die for that religion.
No. What was that movie that came out about the Jehovah's Witness? Was it Apostate? Was that the name of it? About the young girl who needed the blood and she didn't wind up getting it and dying?
Apostasy.
Apostasy, thank you. That what nailed it on the head. I mean, it really did. That is for anybody who's not familiar with Jehovah's Witnesses, watch that movie, because they really nail it right on the head, 100%.
Even the whole atmosphere. The second time I watched the film, I realized everything's beige. Yeah. Everything's muted and beige. Like, the whole atmosphere of the film, I was like, wow, that is exactly what it was like. Yeah.
It really is. I mean, I forget the person who made that, but they nailed it right on the head. No doubt. They really did.
Yeah. And there's another good one. Shout out to Tony Duchesne. He did the Confessions of a Teenage Jesus Jerk.
Oh, yes, and absolutely.
So that's related around a guy getting disfellowshipped, and a lot of people find these films triggering because they are so close to home and true. Yeah. And I've made some of my non-ex Jehovah's Witness friends have watched that, and I've been like, wow, is that actually what it was like being in the religion? And I'm like, yeah,
that's it. That's it. It describes it so well. Yeah, it's great. I have to say that there was, just to be very transparent about it, from like 19 to 21, those ages, I definitely had a very tough time. Even with the help of that family, I had a tough time. I was doing a lot of drinking, a lot of drugs, not like hard drugs, but like a lot of tripping, ecstasy and stuff.
Yeah.
And I went through a couple of hard years of that, because I just did not know how to deal. You know what I mean? But again, luckily, there was something in me that switch shut off by about the time I was 22, and luckily that and that little. But it was definitely a couple of was definitely a couple of years there of tumultuous times. There's no doubt, so.
And also, I don't know if you did, when you leave, you feel like you've got to catch up on so much stuff you missed out on.
Yeah.
So you end up doing things intensely. So you're like, well, I want to try this drug and that drug, and I want to see what it's like to smoke, and I want to drink this and that. And you just want to do all this stuff in a short period of time.
No, that's so true, that you try and jam it all in. One of the things I love now more than any time in my life, especially with children around, are the holidays. And I am very lucky that Adam's mom is very much into the holidays too. So come Christmas time, this whole place just looks like Christmas. Thanksgiving time, I make a joke. There's a American holiday called Flag Day, which is just ridiculous. Nobody ever thinks about it. It's not celebrated. But I often joke, like, you know what, if we could celebrate Flag Day, we would. You know what I mean? Like, to the fullest extent, because it's just, and honestly, being deprived of those holidays as a child, looking at it through my kids' eyes, Christmas morning for my son, Adam, seeing that look in his face is like, I will admit, I live a little bit vicariously through him, but it's amazing to see. It really is. It's the best feeling in the world,
Like, I'm 45 and I've been left the religion 24 years, and I still get excited for Christmas. I'm like a kid, and now I've got like 100 nieces and nephews that I buy them stuff for and make stuff for them, and I'm just like, I love just seeing them on Christmas morning open their presents, and it's just like, yes,
it's the absolute best. It's the best. No, I love it. So again, I anybody that was watching this live stream, if you have any questions, or feel free to message me on Facebook. If you're in the XJW group there on Facebook, feel free. I'll answer anything that I actually haven't looked at the comment section. I know you've been reading them off, but anything that anybody's unsure of or any questions, just feel free to message me. There's no doubt. I'll answer anything I can that I didn't touch on today.
Cool. Yeah, Christmas tree is a must. Like, a few years ago, I was trying to find a pink one for years, because obviously I'm alternative and I'm not going to do the norm. So
sure.
So eventually I found a 6-foot pink Christmas tree. And everyone's like,
awesome.
What, your Christmas tree is pink? And I'm like, yeah, well,
Yeah. And, we all find our own way to celebrate and find some joy.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. I think that's the best thing about leaving that terrible, terrible cult, is just we somehow, it might take a few years, but man, when we're able to let loose, we really do, and find joy in different things that you didn't know could be joyful, because you're taught your whole life that they're terrible. And it's like, even birthday, I saw somebody, here we go, Anita there. I love birthdays. It's like, John, for some reason, I feel like people were taught different things, but I know that the main reason I remember for not being allowed to celebrate birthdays was John the Baptist, right? He got his head cut off at the birthday party. So, that's why my birthdays were so bad. But I mean, celebrating them now is the best thing for friends, family, whatever,
It's just an excuse. And I love that at Christmas. Like, to me, obviously I don't believe what it's about, but it's family and friends to get together and show each other that they care and spend that time together. And for me, that's what it's all about. And
no, exactly, 100%. I love Halloween too. It's amazing. Yeah.
Not Christmas, I can't never choose between which one. But
the same. That whole time of year is amazing though. But our neighborhood happens to be just fantastic for trick-or-treating. Unfortunately, because of COVID last year, it wasn't so good. But so dressing up Adam and then his brother and sister and walking through the neighborhood, and they're getting all the candy. It's just, it's a great feeling. It really is. It makes me smile every time. A little bit of joy for sure.
Yeah. So, and unless you've got anything to add,
no, I mean, I think we covered a lot of the basis of the story. There's a million details to everything, but I mean, I think those are the broad strokes, and I think I got out what the main points were. So,
So, I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's watched and commented.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And I've mentioned before, I've got a group called Ex Jehovahs Witnesses Unite on Facebook. If you're wanting to leave, if you're fading, if you're disfellowshipped, even if you're from another cult. I've got ex-Mormons, ex-Amish, you know, come and join, because a lot of us have been through very similar things. You can come talk about anything, your daily life, rant, go live, just do whatever you need. Like, the group's there for people to use it as they need it. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. And
thank you, everyone.
I will play our outro video so we don't get stuck on an awkward face.
All right, sounds good.
Are we still live? So I'll just put the last few messages up. Thank you both for your lovely interview or help others. Thank you.
I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, from Zach.
Thank you, Zach.
So then I'll take us out with my outro. So thank you, everybody.
Bye.
I'll be back soon. Bye.